Hello and welcome to today's webinar, where we are going to look at one way in which we at MZ are helping universities to understand more about where your graduates actually end up. Here's what we will cover in the next 20 minutes or so. A quick introduction to MZ, a little bit of context scene setting as to why this is an important issue, and then I'll introduce the concept of our alumni mapping insight. Now, for those of you who we don't already work with, MZ is a global labour market leader, and we use our strong labour market intelligence and wider economic understanding to help drive economic prosperity. We work with hundreds of universities right around the world, including in Australia, and it forms part of our core work in connecting three critical audiences. Firstly, people and individuals who are looking to move into and through the economy and through the labour force. Secondly, employers who are always looking to hire good people and become better, more productive, more successful businesses. And educators such as yourselves who are looking to build successful study pathways and to engage and support students as they look to move through those pathways and through and into the labour force and the economy. So we do this through a range of different products and solutions, and also through the innovative application of data through consultancy services. And one of these services is that of alumni analysis and alumni insight, which is what I'm going to introduce today. Now, just before I do so, by way of scene setting and context, I thought it might be useful to spend a couple of moments thinking about why it is important to understand graduate and alumni pathways. And this got me thinking about this question: why do students invest in higher education? What are they expecting to get back from that investment? Now, I asked a number of our university clients to give me their expected answer to that question and their input on why students invest and attend university. And here we see on screen the most typical common responses that I received. And I'm sure that most, if not all of these, are pretty familiar concepts to you. And indeed, I'm sure you have your own common reasons why students engage and attend your university. But if I just simplify these fairly common themes down into categories that any marketing and communication colleagues with us will be familiar with. Firstly, we have those that are actual physical, tangible things that university provides and students can kind of touch and feel and smell whilst they attend. Alongside those are augmented aspects that are very closely aligned with the actual products and actual aspects of university experience. And then finally, those things that aren't necessarily immediately tangible and touchable and visible for students when they're at university, but that are becoming ever more important. If I generalize somewhat, my own experience in working with universities for a number of years is that you're all very good at understanding and articulating the first two, but sometimes the other core products and core themes are a bit more difficult to understand and articulate and get right. But also, I think it's fair to say that these things are becoming more and more important for all areas and departments within your university, as well as your students and your future students. And some really interesting analysis that I read recently in the UK actually bears some of that out. So this graph on screen shows responses for university students over the last 10 years or so, when asked what factors were very important to them when they were choosing their university. And we see the blue line towards the top of the graph there, showing future employability prospects as really important to students when they're making their decision on which university to attend. And it's become more important over the past 10 years, remaining a more important factor during that time period than overall university reputation, which is shown by the yellow line. And the other interesting thing is what the orange and grey lines show us in the bottom half of the graph there. This is showing the fast growing importance of a university having links with industry and employers, and giving students the opportunity to experience life with industry and in employment through things like placements, so that they can start to understand the skills and behaviours that employers will want them to have as they progress through and into their career. So what are some of the innovative ways that we are helping universities to understand all of these issues and to get ahead of the curve where possible? Well, we are starting from a position of strength with our structural global labour market expertise and data, which gives us a full view of all jobs in all economies around the world, with the ability to then dig down to granular levels of industry, occupation, and geography. But we're finding ways to add value to that structural expertise and that structural data to blur the lines between those traditional definitions of jobs and industry. And that's allowing us to better understand the movements that individuals make within companies and through their career pathway. And by fully understanding that more and fully understanding the skills and behaviours that are assisting individuals as they move through the modern labour force, that's helping us to better understand the new and developing non-linear economy. So then let's introduce our alumni mapping, alumni insight work. What we've done over the past couple of years, right around the world, is to build out a unique database that now contains more than 300 million professional individual profiles. We then use that alongside our very strong structural labour data, which I've just previously mentioned, and also add in data from job postings, which is a useful aspect of understanding what's happening right now in the labour force. We can then add your own graduate data into the mix if you want us to do so, and then combine those data sets and those data insights to start to give us some really interesting insight on variables relating to alumni, such as what occupation have your graduates moved into, and how is that occupation structurally recorded versus how those individuals articulate their job title in their professional profile. More simplistically, whereabouts geographically are your graduates located? Who are they employed by? Which employers are employing big chunks of your graduates in which jobs? Is there a pattern of a particular industry that has a big interest in your graduates? What are the typical career pathways and trajectories that your graduates take, both at the beginning of their career and beyond? And is there anything interesting for us to learn from the data in terms of qualifications versus other skills? So as well as the degree that they studied with your university, have they undertaken any subsequent formal training and qualification? Are they recording any non-formal competencies and skills and accreditations? And is that important to them and important to the career trajectory that they have undertaken? Now, I'm sure you can imagine the typical departments and typical areas of a university that would be interested in this. And I hope that is reflected by you attending and registering for today's webinar. And some of those typical usages are appearing on screen right now. I won't talk through them all in turn, but a couple of good examples, I think. Firstly, one university recently wanted us to look at a particular department and a particular area of the university, namely their business school. And they wanted us to help them understand where business school graduates were progressing in the regional and national economy, and how that compared with some other key departments that they were interested in. And that really did lead to some interesting findings. Another good example, a different university wanted us to help them understand, look, what happens to our graduates from a particular set of degrees in a particular department in the first 3 years of their graduation and entry into the labour market, because some of our student satisfaction findings aren't great from those students. We don't have strong relationships with employers really in the area of those particular degrees, and we want to understand where those students are going to, and we help them understand that. Now here's a visualization of some of that analysis that we did. In this particular example, we were looking at graduates from liberal arts generalist degrees, and this university wanted to know which industries, which jobs, and which geographic locations their graduates were progressing to in their first job once they left university, the second job, and you've guessed it, the third job that they went into. So typically within the first 5 years of their graduation, what was the typical flow of job and industry for this particular university's liberal arts generalist graduates? And you can see the patterns there as people leave the degree, moving into particular types of jobs, and then in the second job and third job, some fairly common themes coming through there. This next slide shows a visualization of the same university wanting us to answer that same question for their information technology graduates. And you can see even from this higher level visualization, there's a different pattern. The lines on screen are showing a different pattern for people in their first, second and third job. And this was really interesting analysis for the university. So the stuff at the top there, a fairly linear pathway for graduates into software development and programming jobs, was probably something they already knew, but they wanted to know more about which employers were recruiting those graduates and which jobs those graduates were actually ending up in, and what skills were they talking about having gathered that were helping them get into those jobs, and how that could then help them as a university to engage with that industry and that set of employers in a more informed way. And likewise, the other typical job definitions that people were moving into allowed them to think as well about how their IT graduates were moving into types of jobs that they weren't necessarily expecting, and what was it that was attracting those employers to those particular graduates from an IT background, and what could they learn from that for those graduates who wouldn't necessarily follow the traditional linear pathway into expected careers. Now, a quick note on how we do this. Well, firstly, we look through the 300 million strong database that I mentioned earlier on, and we find your alumni. We then tag those alumni and graduates with the relevant variables, such as the degree of study, their age of graduation, any other study that they've undertaken since, etc. We then push that data through our own MZ Degree Career Association Index, which gives a strong indication of connection between degree and career. So put more simply, this allows us to be more sure about comparing destinations of graduates from degrees against other similar degrees, and comparing graduates who've moved into jobs with similar jobs that are closely linked, so that we get a better non-biased view of those destination pathways, as opposed to just comparing, for example, all IT graduates to every other degree that you guys do. It would tell us something, but how useful that would be in your planning is questionable. We can focus on career pathways and trajectories, just like those previous two slides showed. Or we can focus in on other areas that might be of most particular interest to you, such as what's the biggest volume of destination by geography or industry or even an employer. Whereabouts are your graduates going? Are they remaining in state? Are they moving interstate? Are they moving into a different part of the country or a different part of the world, perhaps? Or indeed, we can look at other variables like remuneration. So are there particularly high-paying jobs in the regional, local or national economy of interest to you? Which of your graduates have moved into those jobs, and why have they moved into those jobs? And quite commonly, we also compare your graduates with people who have similar jobs post-graduation from other degrees, other programs and other universities, to give you a better understanding about who your graduates will most typically be competing with for jobs if they follow the path that the data tells us they are likely to. Now, just to wrap things up somewhat, let me share a quick video of how one of our clients have used some of the data that I've introduced today to better understand their alumni pathways and trajectories from out in the USA in the state of Kansas. So I hope all of that has piqued your interest somewhat, and that you have questions running through your head right now. I would love to chat more individually about your university and the work that you do there, and talk more about how we might be able to add value to what you're doing in this space, and how we might help you understand more about your alumni experience and your alumni career pathways and where they end up. But in the meantime, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have a great day.